All right, ladies, welcome back to the Becoming Her
I'm really
podcast.
excited for the episode that Dr. Ann and I have for you guys today because this is a topic that I have personally struggled with. I know Dr. Ann has struggled with. I think every
Mhm.
single female on our team has struggled with, and probably every single one of you listening to this podcast has struggled with. And we're going to be talking about food noise. And I know that there's a lot of different definitions and meaning to this term, and it means something different, I think, for a lot of different people. But we're going to be really chatting about what is food noise, how do we combat it, and how do we get in front of it. And Ann and I were talking before we hit the record button, and we both handle it in a quote unquote different fashion and dive into it in different ways, but they so much so interconnect, right? And so really, like, playing back and forth, I really just want to go through, and I'm going to let you kind of kick this off, Anne, because I know that for a lot of your clients, when they come to you, this is probably one of the number one things that they're struggling with. And so when you think food noise, like, what is your definition of that?
Well, food noise historically has meant that people are struggling with either wanting to eat, I'm thinking constantly about what I can eat next, what I've just eaten, how many calories are in it, when I get to eat XYZ item, a donut, a cookie next. Um, I'm finishing breakfast and already worried about lunch. I'm finishing lunch and I'm already thinking about what I can have for a snack or what I get to have for dessert or what I get to have for dinner. And so it's this constant, obsessive focus really around food and
It
wanting
consumes
to,
your thoughts, like
yes.
day, like all day, every day consumes your thoughts. It literally runs rampant in your brain.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Also, that I think runs side with that is then also noise about our bodies and what our bodies are doing in that space.
Yeah, the guilt that goes with the food noise is astronomically high.
Yep. And I see this from people in both ends of the spectrums, from people that are restricting really heavily and people that are binge eating or graze eating and struggling with food. That food noise is the same noise. It might exist with different actions, but it actually occurs regardless of what end of the spectrum we're on.
Yeah.
And so, the way I like to talk about it, and I have a unique approach to this as a clinician. In my field, it's called, we refer to it for those people who have eating disorders as Ed or Edwina or, Edward or whatever this is, right? We give it a name. And I call it the little food gremlin. And the way that I like to think of it, it's like almost like this little devil that sits on your shoulder that every single moment it's kind of trying to lure you into a binge or lure you into just focusing on this one thing so you can't accomplish other things, you can't be fully present. And one of the powers of actually labeling it that way and not thinking of it as ourselves, and I'll share the reason how we know it is not us is because when we're well fed, when emotionally things are going great, when everything in our life is kind of swimming along, that food noise tends to disappear. It doesn't always completely disappear, but it tends to get really
Be
quiet. And
controlled, like managed.
yes,
Yes. Yep.
it's easier for us to say no. It's easier for us to pass up the cookie or the donut without going hog wild on it. And so when we think of it kind of almost like a separate entity, like this little gremlin, the power of that is that allows us then to speak to it. And that allows us to identify what it is that you're trying to say to manipulate me into just simply focusing on food or what it is that I'm going to eat next. So, and not only that, but some of the little strategies that go along with this. And I've heard people talk about this before. I've had one. I've ruined my whole day. I might as well just quote unquote enjoy it. That is your food gremlin. That is not you.
I love how you're talking about this. I really hope the listeners are connecting this because this is not, like you said, it's not you. You're speaking to it as if it's somebody completely separate from you. And I feel like where a lot of people struggle is they take on the identity of it, right? And
Yes.
it becomes like, and I talk about this often, I get told, Nicole, I can't do this. I'm a binger. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Well, back up, girlfriend, because I'm pretty sure binger is a noun and binge eating is just something that you did. And
Mm-hmm.
again, something I'm so passionate about, your identity drives your actions and your actions drive your outcome every single time. So if you're identifying as a binger, sure as shit, your actions are going to be in alignment with that. So when you separate the two things, and this is not me, this is something outside of me, and you can speak to it, that's powerful. That's powerful. That's a mic
Mm-hmm.
drop moment right there.
Well, and I want to echo what you're saying because what happens then is that we wind up feeling hopeless and helpless about our ability to master that because we identify with it.
Yep.
And so learning how to spot that, but what's interesting about that is that we also have to learn how to spot the lie. So the lie of it doesn't matter, I've already ruined my day. We
Yes.
can see some truth in that. The truth is almost always easy to see, or things like it doesn't really matter. I'm never going to lose this weight anyway.
That's yeah, yeah.
And
The
and
stories we want to tell ourselves
that's
to
right.
justify it. It's a
And we want to
justification.
believe it. Yes, we
Yes.
want to believe it as truth because we're like, well, I worked on this for 20 years. I worked on this for 10 years. I worked on this for the last 6 months to no avail. My weight hasn't done anything. And so we want to spot the truth versus spotting the lie. And the lie in something like, I've already ruined my day. No, you didn't ruin your day. You had 100, 200, 300 maybe calories of something. That doesn't ruin your day. You just had carbs. You just had some fats.
I would be curious your thoughts around this because I really do feel like people almost want to because it's comfortable for them, right? And the space that they're at is currently comfortable for them. And so it's so much easier to self-sabotage back down to that comfort level than it would be to tackle that. So do you find that with a lot of your clients that you work with, right? Like it's almost a self-sabotage back down to what's comfortable for them because regardless if we want to admit it right now, the state that we're in is the state that we know. And I talk about sabotaging in that thermostat almost. And when it starts to heat up, we want to pull ourselves back down that set point. And so that's something that I really work through with a lot of my clients is that we have to push back like that comfort of like this again, this is all that we know and really reframing and recreating this new identity. So I'd be curious on your thoughts. Do you feel like there's a self-sabotage that goes into that?
There can be. I mean, we're all tremendously creatures of habit, which was
Mhm.
interesting because the last podcast we dealt with boredom,
Yes.
um, and boredom in the change. In that, what's interesting about that is that we all love habits, even bad habits we love,
Mhm.
and we crave them because we crave that consistency. Ironically,
Yes.
so creating new consistency and having the discomfort of things like boredom that occurs again, this isn't new and exciting, and therefore I don't have something shiny new, or we have
Mhm.
kind of that the newbie weight loss, right? And then it slows down. It's like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore because I'm not seeing dramatic results like I
Yeah.
used to. Like that is your little gremlin, right? Because it's
Um,
all it's trying to do is it's trying to get you to go back to where you were that wasn't
mhm.
already working.
Yep.
And we have to actually develop refutations. We have to develop a system in place to learn how to combat that. And that system often can be like a series of phrases. So, I've got to spot the lie of why it didn't ruin my day. But then also I've got to speak back to it. I'm not
Mm.
going to let you ruin this over 200 calories.
Yep. And I think the
It does.
education piece of that is powerful too, like Anne said, because I think most people look at it and they're like, oh, I just ate the donut. I ruined my whole day. In reality, donuts, like a typical glazed donuts around 300 calories. It's like 16 fat, 40 carb. It is so easy if you wanted to eat a donut every single day of your life realistically to be able to fit the donut in easily and still be able to fuel your body with the foods that you need. And I feel like, again, there's the education piece that's lacking for a lot of people because, again, the donut is bad, right? So we perceive it as good versus bad. And then we assign emotion to food. And when we assign emotion to food, we become 10 times more invested into that was bad. I am shaming myself for the guilt, opposed to seeing the actual logical side that a donut is so freaking easy to fit into your day in and day out, if the donut is what does it for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And finding things that match the donut too. So if we get
Mm-hmm.
tired, like because there's a whole episode on how we extinguish some of these trigger foods, but that food noise, and you mentioned this, a part of that food noise is not giving ourselves permission to have the foods that we genuinely want.
Yeah.
Now, I talk with people about this, and again, this is a whole nother episode. I just did this this week with someone where we developed like a food hierarchy and we identified which trigger foods that we could tackle first. So if a food's really big for you, we've got to do it there's got to be a certain method to it to manage it. But ultimately, if you love this food, telling yourself you got to stay away from it doesn't work, and it actually increases some of that food noise because
Yeah.
now you're just thinking about it. I mean,
Well,
I don't know about you, but I've got this teenager that lives inside of me that every single time someone, even myself, says you can't have it, I'm like, I'm going to figure out how to get that now.
We naturally want what we can't have. I think that just goes for anything in life, right? And what I tend to find with a lot of my clients is when we assign emotion good versus bad, we tend to idolize and pedalize certain foods, right? Because the donut is bad, so we stick it on the pedestal because we can't have the donut. And again, we all naturally want what we can't have. So we hyperfixate, we hyperfocus on the donut. It's just like, I'm sure every single one of our listeners, or almost every single one, has tried keto at some point, right? And when you go keto, what's the first thing that you naturally want? Even if you're not a huge potato or bread fan, you want all the carbs, right? Because
Yes.
you're telling yourself you can't have. And so when we idolize and we pedalize, and it's like, I can't have the donut, I can't have the donut, I can't have the donut. And then it's like restrict, 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 restrict until the coworker brings the box of donuts in the office. That's when all willpower goes out the window. And a signature saying of mine is you end up eating like an asshole because you don't know when you're going to allow yourself to eat the donut again. So it's like, I'm going to hoard and I'm going to gorge right now because it might be 3 more months or 6 more months, whatever the case may be, before I allow myself to eat the donut again. And so that's when it starts to become hyper obsessive and hyper focused on, is when you tell yourself you can't have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or I think along with that is we wistfully look at other people eating the donut, and we say something along the lines of, must be nice that they get to have the donut. If I had a good metabolism, if I were 20, if I were 30 again, if I looked like that, I would give myself a
I was
donut.
it must be nice queen back in my, version 1.0 of Nicole. Like I just lived by that mantra. And I built up so much resentment, honestly, towards even my closest friends and family members. It consumed me. And that's a whole nother episode for a whole other day, because
Yep.
quite literally, I was seething inside. I was so angry, and I couldn't figure out why I was so angry either. It just didn't I'm like, here is, my best friend, and I quite literally just want to shake you right now. And I just had so much built up resentment because you're 50 pounds lighter than I am. You get to eat whatever you want. And here I am busting my ass, like restricting all of my foods the majority of the time, double time in the gym of what felt like, and not seeing any results that went with that. And that is connecting those two things. That's powerful. Another mic drop moment. Dr. Ann's coming in hot today. So yeah.
Well, and that correlates with a lot of self-pity. And one of the things
Mm,
that I want to note about self-pity is that self-pity is actually really disempowering, because when we're in a place of self-pity, we're in a place of victimization.
yeah.
Woe is me. I'm the only person on the planet, or that segment of people on the planet, that can never eat any dessert without gaining 5 pounds
Mhm.
overnight. Like
Yep.
that's just, unless metabolically there's something going on with you, which is genuinely,
A
I'm sure
thing.
if I were here, she would talk about a hormone issue,
Yeah.
right? Like there's got to be something addressed. Most of us can eat most things,
Yeah.
almost
And
all
it's
things.
creating a metabolism that supports that too. There's a lot that, there is some things that go on, but yes, there's no reason that most of us can eat all the things if we understand the amounts and how to fit them in. Yes.
That's it.
Yep.
Right. So, and again, that echoes back to that boundary thing that I was talking about. We have to have, and we have to understand what solid boundaries are, because our, what feels like is a boundary, which is the, no, I'm not going to have any sweets, I'm not going to have any sugar, I'm not going to have whatever food it is that I will go nuts on or eat like a trash panda. Um, that actually isn't a boundary. That's just avoidance.
Mm,
That's all that is.
mm,
When we're creating boundaries, what we're doing is we're creating safety around how to have those foods. So if you eat donuts like a trash panda, then maybe you need to have one donut at a donut store with like your
mhm.
husband or your friend or your kids, and then move on and do something else. And
Yeah.
that's another technique that we use with food noise, that after, after you're done eating and you notice your brain wanting to focus on something else, do something incompatible with that obsessive thought pattern.
Yep.
Go for a walk, have a conversation with something, get really engaged in a jigsaw puzzle or a workout. And I know this is really hard to do all the time. And and some people are like, well, I'm master multitasker. I can work and do stuff and still think about food. All right. I feel you on
Mm,
that one. And that can be us. But again, if we're doing something that's really incompatible, if we're really using our brain or really trying to focus, and we're actually engaged in spotting some of the lies behind, you want to think of like that little food gremlin, he's going to keep talking in the background until you tell him to shut up.
yeah. Oh,
And
mm-hmm.
and until you identify what exactly he's trying to say to you. And I don't know about you, but one of my favorite sayings in my head was always, I will start tomorrow.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm going to finish this bag of cookies tonight. I will start. Yep. Hands down.
Oh, I just have some ice cream that I really want to eat in the freezer. And once I get that, and once I, and it's going to be Christmas and Thanksgiving, I'm going on vacation. After that, though, I'm going to start.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and this is that gremlin. And I don't know about you, but there's never tomorrow. There's never a tomorrow. Like that little gremlin wants to keep pushing it down the road,
Yeah, I
right?
totally agree. And I feel like the little gremlin is a powerful concept. But what I run into a lot as well, and where we, with a lot of our clients, work through the food noise, and I talk about this often, is a lot of the time, particularly with the women that we work with coming in from such an underfed background, the majority of the time, right? I always like to reference it's not so much that you're craving the donut as much as it is that you're craving the energy that comes from the donut because you're
Oh, you
so
bet.
underfed the majority of the time. And when we start to truly like click and it starts to connect how we fuel our body properly and we start to give our body more whole foods, more protein, more fiber, that donut craving dramatically decreases because you're giving your body what it needs. Now, I'm not to say there's not going to be days that you just want a donut because a donut is delicious and who doesn't want a donut from time to time, but that
Mhm.
need to constantly like obsess over the donut and create like the constant craving for the donut dramatically decreases when we start fueling your body correctly. And that is one thing when that really connects for a lot of our clients. It's like a light bulb moment. And they're like, holy crap, Nicole, my cravings are basically non-existent. And I said, well,
Mhm.
it's a combination of a few things, right? It's a combination of the fact that you truly are fueled correctly. We're feeding you well right now. And you're starting to see that by eating more food doesn't necessarily mean that we gain weight, doesn't necessarily mean that we go in the backwards direction. We're starting to understand that food's not the enemy. But on the flip side of that, if you want a donut every single day, you now have the power and the understanding and the education working through this to how to fit a donut in, or like Anne said, whatever that equates to the donut, the fun foods, the soul foods for you. And it's no longer, I have to wait till the weekend, or I hate, if there is one topic that just gets me going and fires me off is this concept of cheat meals and cheat days. They're just
Yeah.
glorified binge days is all that they are. I mean, that could be a whole podcast topic for a whole like different day. But I
Yeah.
mean, there's nothing that fires me up more than this idea of cheat foods. Like you may cheat on a test or like heaven forbid your tax or whatever the case may be, but you don't cheat on your diet, right? Like this whole good versus bad, but we save it up and it's like, no longer do we need to save the donut for a Saturday or because, if we want a donut on a Tuesday, we know how to fit the donut in. So a combination of being properly fueled plus the education is truly on our team working through, and obviously with the addition of you as well, working through the mental space of tackling your relationship with food. That's how we combat food noise. That's how we get to a place where we control food and food no longer controls us.
You can lie on your diet. You can lie about what you're eating. You can lie on MyFitnessPal, but you cannot lie to your body, right? Because when you eat something, regardless of whether or not you want to consider it your cheat meal or not, your body is going to manage that differently, right? And I had somebody in my office just earlier today. We were talking about vacations, and they were getting kind of the swing of things in terms of how to eat, manage some of the food noise, and manage
Mhm.
some of the, manage to get like some steps in and that kind of stuff. And they said, I keep going on vacation. Every single time I go on vacation, I kind of go, left to center. I said, well, do you want to keep vacationing? She goes, well, of course. I
Yep.
said, well, then we got to incorporate vacationing with your food. Like
Yep. A
the
1000%.
vacation doesn't mean that you get to eat whatever you want. Vacation means that maybe you get to eat some foods that traditionally you don't, but it still needs to fit in what it is that you got to get in.
Yep. And it's again that concept of understanding how to eat the foods that you need and combine it with the foods that you love. And that's actually another really powerful concept. And I might like piggyback off of this because something that I work through with a lot of our clients as well is not every occasion is a special occasion. And I feel like
Mhm.
people want to justify, and I know we've chatted about this a little bit, but they want to justify, oh, Jimmy got an A in math, ice cream and donuts, right? And we reward with food. And not to say that food can't be celebratory and not to say that food can't be social, entertainment, enjoyment. Yes, but there comes a space where again, not every occasion is a special occasion. Just because you're going out with your girlfriends doesn't mean we have to go hog wild and it's, like a full pizza and,
Yep.
celebrating with a couple donuts and we get home and then we already quote unquote blew it kind of concept, right? And so understanding that these occasions are always going to be there. And like you said, it's managing those because I don't want a life without vacation. I don't want a life without date nights or girls' nights out or any of those things. And
So it's
so,
and that goes back to that boundary thing, right? So if if I understand in my head that I have, a certain number of protein, like again, I need to get in my protein. I've got to prioritize my protein, but I want a margarita. I want chips with my girlfriends. Wonderful. Calculate that in for your day. Figure
Yep.
out how you're going to do that. That can work, but maybe it doesn't mean that you get the jumbo margarita and you eat half a thing of chips. Maybe you get a serving size of chips and you have a small margarita, and that is your portion size, and you allot for that.
And then you make sure your entree is the chicken fajitas and what's going to fuel your body correctly, right? You're getting your
Yes.
protein in. And then that is exactly what we call lifestyle. There is no need to cut anything out. We still get to enjoy. And then you leave. And then let's talk about the feelings that we have when we master these concepts, right? You leave that luncheon or whatever the case may be, that outing with your girlfriend, feeling so mother effing empowered, feeling in control, right? Because how many times, I mean, myself included, I'm sure you as well, Anne, you've left some sort of like occasion and you just are miserable, you're stuffed sick, like you're kicking yourself in the ass, you're pissed off, you're talking to yourself, like, you know what I mean? I think back to how I used to talk to myself in this phase of my journey, and it makes me sick to my stomach. Nicole, you fat POS, who do you think you are again? Like trying to, and it literally makes me sick. But when you master these concepts and you walk away just feeling empowered and in control, there's such a power to that I don't feel like enough people talk about, because I don't know if even enough people truly understand what that feels like, to be honest with you. Like, I
Yes.
just don't think they connect the two.
Well, and I've never, and I challenge people to look at it like this. Think about, instead of going on vacation, having like doing whatever you want to do, and it's a free for all, instead thinking about what would make me most proud of how I manage food on vacation. I've never once heard any human being say I was proud that I drank excessively and I overate. Never once.
Yep. Yep.
And generally, when people talk about being proud of themselves, they're saying things like, I had a few drinks, it was really lovely, and then I moved on. I had two or three macarons, and then I
Mm-hmm.
didn't continue to eat the rest of the day. I let myself have the croissant, and that was my breakfast. And
Mm-hmm.
then I ate normally for lunch and dinner.
Yes.
So again, do you see, we can still have the foods that we love. We may not be able to have them in the portion size. And this, we've got to break up with this idea that human beings exist out there, that everyone else out there eats whatever the heck they want, whenever they want, and without any budget, because it
It doesn't
very
exist.
rarely ever exists.
Yeah.
It does exist, but it rarely ever exists.
Well, I think it exists in a space that can do people, is there a metabolic space and just, in sense of a genetic space that some people are a bit more blessed than others? Yes, absolutely. But I do feel like there's a place where it catches up to them, right? So in the moment it may exist for them, but that will catch up to them eventually. And so this idea that, this person may have this, oh, I can eat whatever I want, I can get away with it. I guarantee you that kind of mindset doesn't mean that your body feels good though either, right? Or that it's running optimally. And that's a completely, again, different concept of, okay, this person may eat like a trash can and a garbage disposal, and they may look really good on the outside, but internally they're not running optimally. They're just not. And so at some place it will catch up to them. But yes, there are some that are genetically blessed. And I've known a few of them where, I mean, I've had friends that easily put away 400 or 500 grams of carbs a day and they're rail thin, and, genetically they are blessed. But I've also seen it catch up to them at some place. And so I just think I think there's that distinction of understanding, like you said, that when we can quiet the gremlin, but we combine that with the education to be able to do so. And then we let go of that self-pity as well. And the self-pity piece of it is something I don't think enough people talk about either.
Yeah, well, and the self-pity, I mean, it correlates with shame and grief. But the power behind some of that, and even acknowledging that I'm in a place of self-pity, and especially when it comes to food, like if you look at other people because they're amazing artists and you say to yourself, woe is me, I'm not an amazing artist, like
Mm,
that's the same thing, but we don't think of it like that.
yeah.
Instead, we look at that other person, we go, wow, you have an amazing gift. And us learning our own gifts, that's a part of our journey for positive self-esteem and good self-confidence. But we all have something to contribute, and we're all different. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that you're a victim because you didn't get it.
Yeah. 1,000%. No, that's really powerful there. I also want to walk through kind of what your thought process, because something that I work with a lot of my clients is once we start to tackle our relationship with food, we start to understand how to fuel our body correctly, there comes a place where really looking at food, because I feel like a lot of people, they see food and, you know, that meme or whatever, it's the seafood diet. I see food and I eat it. But
Yeah.
understanding that, for me personally, something that works really well for me and that I help work through with a lot of my clients is if it's not a whole body yes, then it's a no. And when we're talking how to manage vacations and whatnot, I feel like a lot of people think just because the food's there, they have to eat it. And being able to
Mm,
understand, even if that's not a food that you would typically eat, right? And it's one thing if you want to try it because you're curious. But so for
mhm,
me, I'm one of those rare exceptions. I'm just not really a pasta fan. It doesn't do it for me. It just never has, and it probably never will. Like it's just not something. So, but I used to, when I would be on these, like if it was there, even though I didn't quote unquote enjoy it, I was still eating it. And I'm like, and
mhm.
I'm eating this food going, why am I eating this? I'm not really even enjoying this food. And so something that really works well when I, work through with vacations and date nights out and all the things, if it's something that you look at and you're just like, oh yeah, yeah, that's that for sure. Right. And put it on your plate, like enjoy that food. But if you're looking at it and you're like, right, like I feel like a lot of people struggle with just passing up on it. And it's just that you don't have to eat it. And so I'd really love to know your like thoughts in and around that. Like if that's something that any of your clients struggle with, because it's something I really struggled with for a long time because the food was there, I was eating it. And it was, I feel like the food noise, it was like this FOMO even of like, I was missing out on something. Maybe it's really good. And so I'm eating it. I'm like,
Mhm.
man, I'm just still eating it. So I'd love to
Uh-huh.
hear like kind of your like thoughts there.
Yeah, or free food. I know a lot of people that work in healthcare that have drug reps bring in food, and because they bring it in, it's like, oh, I don't want to miss this opportunity to eat
Mm-hmm.
this,
Yeah. Cause it's
even
for,
though
yeah, that's a,
maybe I already had lunch, maybe I already brought a lunch that I really love, but you know what? I don't get to have Jimmy John's that often, and again, not that anything's wrong with it. I don't get to have pizza that often. Might as
mhm.
well go ahead and have it
Yeah.
now, but I'm not hungry. Um, and so with that, I like to encourage people to think about food like, and this will be a little bit interesting, but almost like clothing or shoes. You ever go and you see a pair of shoes and then you look at the price tag and you're like, whoa, really?
Not
That
worth
cost
it. Like it was cute until I saw the price tag and I'm like, that's not $200 cute kind of thing.
yes.
Yeah.
Or you go and find shoes and you're like, $20. I could do that because if they fall apart, I don't like them. You know what? I only need them for this one or two occasions. It's totally fine. It's
Yep.
reasonable, right? But we kind of eye things and we look at things and go, is it worth the cost? Is that worth my
Mm,
money to spend it on that? And then we have to evaluate that. Well, maybe I would buy those $100 pair of shoes if they were on half off sale or 75% off sale, right? And that would seem reasonable for me. And so this concept of I really, really want it, I really love it. Yes, absolutely. That's spot on how I encourage people to think about food. It's is that worth the cost? And I
mhm.
think about that when, I don't if I go to the store and I pick up sometimes treats for my kids and I'll think, they'll say, hey mom, can you get the little Debbie snacks? And I'm like, oh, gross. I
Right.
don't like why. And I'm like, man, I remember the days that I ate those and I don't understand now. It's a budget thing,
Mhm.
right? So I'm thinking, do I want some decadent chocolate dessert you made at a bakery with all of the gooey toppings and I can enjoy every piece? Or do I want this thing that maybe has sat on a shelf for a few weeks? I
Mhm.
want the bakery item.
Yeah. You and I both. You and I
And
both.
so I'm like, no, thank you. I'm not going to waste I'm not going to waste my carbs, my fat. I'm not going to waste it on that because I'd rather have the real thing and get to enjoy it.
Yeah. I want to piggyback too off of this to whole budget conversation that we're having because this is the power and this is something I talk about so often. And one of the only ways I was ever able to get to a place of tackling my food noise was understanding how to fuel my body correctly. And the only thing that gave me the education awareness, I mean, I talk about this, my first coach, that man not just changed my life, that man saved my life, but also the power of macros and tracking and understanding the budget, right? And I want to dive into this with you because this is something I get met with a lot of resistance when I talk to people when I talk about tracking. And tracking is one of those things I'm very vocal about my opinions on tracking. I truly feel like that we track for the short term, so we do not have to track for the long term. I don't want any of my clients attached to a food scale or a tracking app for the rest of their life. I just don't. That's not a lifestyle. That's a mother effing prison sentence. But there is a
Mhm.
time and space that I feel like every person on this planet should track for a short period of time. First of all, going to teach and educate you on how much you are are or are not eating the majority of the time. It is going to help
Hmm.
educate you on how to eat all of the foods that you love and still see success. And three,
Hmm.
it helps us achieve a very specific outcome, right? And when we talk about the look, not just the number, but the look, because toned, and I put this in, like, if you're not watching this on the video, I'm putting this in quotations, toned equals muscle and toned equals strategy. You're not going to wake up one day toned. If that's your end outcome, right? Like you want the banging bod that you feel damn good and naked, that requires a strategy. And so tracking is going to be a piece of this. And when you say the budget tracking, and when I get met, because I get met with a lot of resistance of that's obsessive. Like I don't want my daughter to see me tracking. It's overwhelming. It's all of these things. And I'm like, I want to stop you right there, because if you were budgeting your bank account, or you saw somebody budgeting their bank account, would you ever walk up to them and think that's obsessive or tell them that's obsessive? Absolutely not, right? Like when we look at it as a bank account with money being withdrawn and deposited and being able to, budget your account accordingly, no. But tracking and your intake is no different than a budget. It's just not. It's your perception around tracking and the way that you view tracking, right? And what you may seem as obsessive, for me, discipline equals freedom. Almost like you may view tracking everything as obsessive and over the top, but I view it as, okay, I track my intake, I know my intake, and now the freedom that comes with that is if I want a donut, I get to eat a donut. Where you're restricting the donut because the donut's bad, I understand how to fit the donut in. And so you may deem as me tracking as obsessive, but to me that's more freedom than it is anything else. And then it's like, well, I don't want my daughter or my kids see me tracking, and I'm like, my son sees me tracking all the time. He tracks now too, right? Because he's quarterback on a football team. We have to make sure that he's fueling his body enough. And so he knows I track to make sure I'm eating enough. It's not because it's a subtraction thing, it's an addition thing. And so this concept that because I feel like there's such a stigma around tracking, and I know it might be different for those working through like an eating disorder, and that's a completely different realm. I hear that, a
It
completely different realm, right? And I'm not talking to that person, I'm talking to the everyday person.
is.
That has this mindset around tracking. And I would love to hear your thoughts, because it's the budget and it's the education of how to balance that budget and understanding that it should not be this forever thing where you're attached. But once you develop the education and awareness in and around how much 6 ounces of chicken really, or what 6 ounces of chicken really looks like, or a serving size of nut butter really looks like, and we get you to a place of maintenance and you've achieved your body composition goals, that's when we transition you. And that's the goal for every single one of my clients, is intuitive eating. But that right is earned, it's not given. You can't expect somebody who's never tracked a day in their life to intuitively eat and think that that's going to work out well for them, right? Like
Yep.
intuitively, I would want the macaroni and cheese and the foods that are really highly palatable because they're super high in carbs and they're super high in fats with very little protein. Intuitively, I think we all would quote unquote do that. And so this idea of the obsessiveness that comes with tracking, but I love to reference it and think of it as just that, as a budget, and understanding how to balance that budget. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because like I said, I know you work with a completely different spectrum of those struggling with eating disorders at time. And again, I'm not talking to that specific person, but more so probably the everyday listener.
Yes. So, I'm going to add in here the disclaimer on that, the eating disorder in particular, because I think it merits at least brushing over from a clinical perspective. So with calorie counting, tracking grams of fat, macros, even, that's for some people that have had a history of eating disorder, can create significant anxiety because it's attached to worthiness, and then fuels additional behavior. So people
Mm-hmm.
who kind of have these obsessive loops where if I overeat by 100 calories, by 5 calories, by, whatever, and overestimating calories and not being realistic about how much they actually are eating because they want to give cushion in their
Mm-hmm.
calorie loads, it creates some obsessive patterns. And so even then, what I do want to say is that even then, when I'm working with people with eating disorders, they still are tracking their food. They're using things like recovery records. So they're getting in and they're learning what 3 ounces of meat looks like. They're learning what a portion size of fat looks like, how to see what a tablespoon, and sometimes we'll even have them measure. So this concept of tracking actually is really helpful, because what it actually increases is our mindfulness skills. And
Mm-hmm.
everything that I do in therapy, be it I'm in couples counseling, we're talking about depression, we're talking about food gremlins. A lot of what we're doing is about learning mindfulness
Mm-hmm.
skills so that we don't default into our resting habits.
Got it.
And when we're working on change, it does require us to utilize significantly more mindfulness skills and mindfulness based tracking patterns.
Mm,
Budgeting is a great example. So with people when they're struggling to manage their money, sometimes have to look at their bank account once a week and take a look at all of the little expenses that they, again, there's money grumbling that says it's just $5 for
only five
Starbucks.
bucks.
It's not
Yeah.
that big of a
Yeah.
deal, right? Again, there's that lie. It's not that big of a deal. And before you know it, at the end of the week, that not that big of a deal amounts to $100, $200 of tiny little purchases that you had no idea cost that much
They add up
overall.
quickly. Yep. Yep.
And that's exactly what we're talking about with food. Now, for me, because the population that I work with is that I do say that we want to move out of that relatively quickly, but a part of this is, and I don't mean quickly, quick is quick is relative to us. If we've been practicing eating like trash pandas our entire life, and we join this when we're in our late 30s, 40s, and 50s, quickly might mean several months of doing
Yeah.
this,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? In the grand scheme of things, if you learn the skill sets, you learn how to eyeball, you learn how to look at your bowl at home and see what a portion size of fruit looks like and roughly how many 200 grams of raspberries looks like. That's beautiful. You only have to measure it a few times and track it a few times before you understand this is what I can have for breakfast.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This
That's
is how
about
I meet my
10%.
protein goals. This is how I keep things in check. And this is how I lead my morning. And then I'm not hungry again until lunch. And so a lot of those mindfulness skills are things, again, that we got to be really painful, but we got to be able to sort through that anxiety and share the anxiety with the coach, with the team, be able to acknowledge I have a lot of anxiety and not sure this is going to work, and just see what happens. That's it. And usually when it backfires and it gets more obsessive is when it is literally about a fear or worthiness hustle. So
Mm,
when your value is rooted on how many calories you ate in the day, is when I see people, and the same thing I see with the scale. When my value and my worthiness is rated to what that scale says, that's where we're going to have issues with obsessiveness.
yep. I agree. And I think a lot of people view tracking too as this idea of subtraction. And in reality, for a lot of people, you should be viewing it as an idea of addition,
Oh
right?
my
Like
goodness.
tracking
Yes.
is giving me the ability to add so much more to my day, and the mindfulness and the education and awareness in and around how to do that. And I feel like there's a stigma with tracking that it automatically means restriction, right? Like I'm tracking my food. So that means
Mhm.
I'm restricting my food and I'm restricting my intake. And honestly, that could not be farther from the truth. I mean, is there phases of restriction and dieting phases? Is there phases where calories go less for certain periods of time? Absolutely. It needs to be strategic. But for most, particularly like that we work with, it's more of an addition thing than it is a subtraction thing. And so I feel like the stigma, like I said, around it is it it's really negative, and it's this negative correlation that if I'm tracking, I'm restricting, and then I'm becoming obsessive. And again, I view it as a space of, while yes, it might be a slightly more disciplined than what some that are not tracking are used to, but it gives me so much more freedom. And so that is a power when it's like, okay, it's an extra step for me to track my intake, but that extra step allows me to eat a donut. I'm going to take the extra step and still have a body that I love and still be able to enjoy like the donut and have the flexibility and have the freedom. And so again, it should not be something to where it's hyper fixated on, like you said, and we're tracking every tiny little morsel of and weighing everything out for the rest of our life. But no, that's not lifestyle. And that's not what I want for anybody. But I do feel like every single person on this planet should take a period of time to track, because it's eye opening. It is eye opening.
Well, and I know that when I did it, two things I want to say about that is that tracking can actually help us incorporate foods that are hard for us, like donuts or cookies or
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff, right?
1000%.
Because then it's like, all right, maybe I can't have, and there's another episode on this and how American diets are really problematic. We go buy stuff, we get, 4 portion sizes in one, and we
Yeah.
think we should be able to eat the one. That's like, the crumble cookie, that's 4 cookies.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, but tracking out actually allows us to incorporate those things with a lot less anxiety, because we just see it's a fat and a carb. That's it. It's not
Mhm.
that big of a deal. You just ate some carbs and fat. That's
Well,
it.
we're taking the emotion out of food again.
Yes.
It allows us to take the emotion out and put the logic in.
Yes. And what I found for myself with tracking is that I would make a dinner and I would feel relatively full. And then I'd be like, oh my goodness, I still have 20 grams of protein to get in. And I'd
Mhm.
be like, all right, I'm going to have some yogurt. I'm going to have some,
Yep, yep.
I'm gonna have some sausage. I'm not sure what I need to eat, but it was really eye opening for me to realize there were so many times that I thought that something was not working right, because around 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, I was hungry again, but I was full at dinner. Why would I be hungry again? Oh, it's because I didn't eat enough protein for the day.
Yep. And those connections are huge, 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 huge. I could not agree more. And I'm just so passionate about this topic because I get met with so much resistance when I start to talk about this, and I get the stigma around it. And I know for some, when maybe they've tried it, but they've implemented it in more of a negative light and in more of a subtraction light and more of a light of restriction, opposed to trying to utilize it as a positive, like addition kind of concept, and being able to give us a bit more freedom, right? And flexibility within our diet, and this is how we truly understand how to eat all the foods that we love and still see success. And again, numbers matter, and they matter a lot. Amounts matter, and they matter a lot. You may not be able to eat, like Anne said, a whole crumble cookie every single day and think that that's still going to fit within your macros. You're still going to hit your protein and do the things. Probably not. But I guarantee, and it goes back to, like we said earlier, that if you're fueling your body correctly, you're not going to want a whole crumble cookie every single day. You're just not. It becomes, it's just a completely different space when you fuel your body correctly. But again, the majority of people don't understand what that feels like. And it hurts my heart because I lived in that space for so long, and I couldn't understand why I felt like I was a garbage disposal. I could eat and eat and eat and eat, and I was never satiated, but it was because I was eating 85% processed junk and wondering why I was not full. Like people talked about being stuffed. I'm like, what is that? What's stuffed? Like, what do you mean stuffed? Like, I honestly didn't even realize or understand what stuff felt like, unless it was like Thanksgiving, I made myself sick, and I did that often. Right. But this normal people ate dinner and they're like, oh yeah, I feel good, I'm stuffed. I never had that unless I was sick. And so, but again, it was because it was my food choices. And this is the power of tracking when you understand, with the education of how we obviously implement this correctly. Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And that in turn contributes to that food noise, right? This idea, like, I'm still hungry, I still want more. I want to just, there's a quote that I love: we crave what we consume. And so as we go through this process of shifting what our needs are, what our body actually nutrient wise needs, what happens is we begin to actually crave those foods. Now, if you've never liked Brussels sprouts, please don't assume that if you start eating Brussels sprouts, you're going to love them. That's not what I'm talking about. But we actually can develop a palate for vegetables. We can develop a palate
For
for
sure.
whole foods, just like we've developed a palate for processed foods.
No,
But we keep eating them. We get back in line. We find things that we really enjoy. And we incorporate those in with some of these whole foods, and we start cooking, or we start doing different things with food. It completely changes this noise up here.
yeah, it's huge. And I think you just made a powerful like point there as well, just because I feel like a lot of people, they're like, oh, I need to hit my protein goal, I have to eat chicken, and I don't really enjoy chicken. No, you don't. If you don't enjoy chicken, please don't eat chicken. Find a protein source that you enjoy, right? Just like Anne
Please
said,
don't. Yes.
if you need to add some micros and we need some fiber, and fiber is crucial. I feel like fiber is so underrated and not talked about enough. Protein kind of steals the show, and protein's really freaking important, but fiber is right there with it. So if you need more fiber and you hate Brussels sprouts, please don't eat Brussels sprouts. I mean, I happen to really love them. My stomach doesn't love them, but I happen to really love
I
them.
hear you.
Yeah, my digestion takes a hit every single time. But find the foods that you do love and incorporate more of those foods, right? So it's this idea that I have to eat a certain food, and no, you don't have to eat a certain food. Just like it's like this idea of training. I have a lot of people who are like, I know hip thrusts are supposed to be really great for growing your glutes. I don't love hip thrusts. I'm like, then we don't need a hip thrust. There's so many alternative exercises that we can incorporate that are going to be fire to grow your glutes without hip thrusting. Just because one person does this and swears by it and loves it and says that that's how she has an ass the size of Texas and that stops traffic, doesn't mean that that's what we need to do. Right. And so this is all about the sustainability piece, but when you're eating foods that you love, that is a surefire way to help calm down the food noise, right? Because those cravings just aren't there anymore, and incorporating all of those things. This has been fire. And I know I say every single podcast, it's a fire podcast, but and maybe we're slightly biased, but do you have anything else to add to this? Cause I just think this has been such a really well-rounded conversation. I think a lot of this, every single one of our listeners is really going to resonate with at some point. I've experienced this at some point in my life, and just some really solid tactics to hopefully that they can start to implement to quiet the gremlin, as Anne would say. But do you have anything else that you want to add?
Just start.
Yeah. Yep.
You don't have to make it perfect. You don't have to have a perfect diet. You don't have to clean everything up. Just
Yes.
start somewhere.
Just start somewhere. I think we're going to do a whole podcast on this and we're going to talk about how to calculate macros and really, but I love the concept of just starting and lowering the cost or barrier to entry, right? I feel like some people like set the bar so high, and if they can't hit every single metric, then they do nothing at all. And we're really going to dive into this on a future podcast that we have planned out, but just like, yeah, start by simply increasing your protein amount. Start by simply increasing your veggie consumption. Like just start somewhere. And it's the snowball effect. And I
Yep.
just like yeah.
Or start by, like, even I tell people, start by tracking.
Yeah.
I tell people, if they use MyFitnessPal, never complete your day. It's going to tell you you're going to weigh 400 pounds at the end of 5 weeks. You keep eating like this. Like, just record. That's
Yep.
just get comfortable recording and seeing that number go up and down and noticing trends.
Yes.
You're
Oh,
already eating that.
yep.
You're not lying to your body about what you're eating. You're just lying to yourself, and you're not coping with it.
Yep. And that's by just tracking alone gives you that foundational starting place, right? Now we have data and now we can pivot from that data. So, and again, another podcast that we're really going to dive into all this because that is, and again, such a powerful concept. So thank you so much, you guys, for listening. Your guys' support means absolutely everything to us. If you guys have found value at all so far, please a 5-star review. We are finally out on Apple Podcasts as well. We were only on Spotify there for a minute, but we have released on Apple Podcasts. We'll be coming to Amazon Podcasts and whatnot here pretty soon. But if you guys have found value at all, a 5-star review, tagging us, like screenshotting, sharing to your social media, tagging us means the world. But we will see you guys in the next episode. Ciao.
If this is helpful, give me a like, follow me, or subscribe for more.